how is it possible that with all our incredible knowledge, all our vast resources, as a society, people still lack the most basic human dignity, like food and shelter?
Yeah.
It's a question that, for me, it cuts right to the core of how we understand our world. It's a paradox that should really haunt us. And it's precisely this profound, unsettling question that serves as the powerful starting point for the deep dive we're about to embark on today.
It truly is a fundamental challenge, one that many might dismiss as maybe just an abstract economic issue or perhaps an inevitable outcome of, human nature.
Right.
But as our source material for today reveals, the author delves far deeper. They suggest it speaks to a deep systemic flaw in the very design of our economic reality.
Exactly. So today we're embarking on an ambitious deep dive into a really radical proposal, one that challenges our very understanding of value, wealth, and the foundational principles of economics itself. Our mission is to unpack a thought experiment presented in a fascinating source titled A Copernican Revolution for Economics. We're going to explore its audacious premise, its sharp critique of the current system, and then its truly revolutionary vision for a completely different way of organizing society and, distributing value.
And the author kicks things off by articulating this profound dissatisfaction with the conventional explanations. The answers we usually get for that initial paradox you posed, the persistent suffering amidst abundance.
Right, the standard answers.
Exactly. They specifically call out a common philosophical stance, one famously articulated by Niall Ferguson in The Ascent of Money, which suggests financial markets are simply a mirror of mankind.
Ah, yes, the mirror idea.
Yeah, faithfully reflecting both our blemishes and our beauty. It's kind of a comforting thought, isn't it? That the system is neutral, it just shows us who we are, warts and all.
And the author immediately counters that, proposing something far more unsettling. That perhaps the mirror isn't just reflecting, maybe it's designed to disorientate.
Like a funhouse mirror.
Exactly. Like a funhouse mirror, it shows you a reflection, yes, but one so distorted you can barely recognize yourself, or maybe the true nature of reality. We're going to explore that idea in depth. Examine the fundamental problem the author sees, and then delve into the surprising, almost mind-bending solution they propose.
Okay.
So let's dive into that unsettling question right away. This central problem posed by the author, the persistence of poverty, the lack of basic human dignity despite abundant knowledge, resources. It isn't just some abstract economic debate, is it?
No, not at all.
It feels like a deep fundamental flaw in our societal system, something that should keep us up at night.
What's truly fascinating here is how the author frames it. They aren't just lamenting the outcomes, the symptoms, they're directly challenging the underlying philosophical stance, the one you just mentioned, from people like Niall Ferguson.
The neutral mirror idea.
Exactly. The pervasive idea that financial markets are just passively reflecting human nature, good, bad, ugly. The author finds this deeply, fundamentally unsatisfying.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit more. The author takes aim at this widely accepted view. Financial markets as simple reflections. It's almost the default setting, right? We're told markets are efficient, they aggregate desires, flaws, but the author's challenge is pointed. What if that reflection is deliberately skewed?
Precisely. They propose that perhaps the mirror is designed to disorientate. That implies a much deeper systemic issue, doesn't it? Not just a reflection of inherent human flaws.
It really does.
And this raises a huge question for us. Is our economic system truly neutral, just a tool we wield? Or does its very design actively shape our values, perpetuate these problems, maybe even obscure our understanding of what truly holds value?
It implies a kind of intentionality, or at least an inherent bias built into the structure itself.
Right, a structural bias. And from there, the critique gets even sharper, almost accusatory. The source argues that the capitalist system is, and this is key, by design, focused on claims of value only for physical arrangement.
Not an accident, but a design choice.
Exactly. A fundamental design flaw, leading to what the author calls an irrational and by and large unfair relationship between human effort and natural resources. That's a pretty strong indictment.
It really is. It suggests the system is fundamentally misaligned with, human well-being and maybe even natural balance.
Indeed. The author illustrates this by pointing to the degradation of human existence into mindless capitalist consumers or communist drones to produce goods solely for consumption.
Oof, strong words.
Very strong. But if you look around, this relentless focus on physical accumulation, on consumption, often at the expense of genuine human contribution, it becomes pretty evident, doesn't it?
Yeah, you see it everywhere.
It suggests a system where our innate purpose, our creativity, our very sentience gets reduced to just a means to an end, consume or produce for consumption.
Which leads to this disconnect where the value isn't in the act of making or thinking or caring.
But in the thing itself, the made thing, which then becomes an object of competition, scarcity, and often, ultimately, waste.
So it's not just about unequal wealth distribution or policies or even individual moral failings. The author is saying the problem is way more foundational.
Right.
It's about the core design principle of what we assign value to, a system that, in this view, inherently prioritizes owning physical stuff
Accumulating material wealth.
over recognizing human effort or the intrinsic worth of someone's mental contribution or even the planet's health. It's built on physical scarcity, not human potential.
Precisely. The critique isn't just about outcomes, it's about the design. Valuing physical objects over human effort. This shifts our attention from what we do and create with our minds to what we possess physically.
Leading to a society consumed by accumulation, not contribution.
Exactly. The value isn't in the making or thinking, but the made thing. And that becomes the point of contention, of scarcity. Think about it. Our whole financial system is based on scarcity, right? Limited resources, limited capital.
Yeah, that's basic economics 101.
But the author contends this is an artificial constraint, designed by us, and it limits our collective potential.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. Almost like a thought experiment in reverse. Instead of building on current assumptions, the author says, let's just toss them out.
Yeah, jettison them completely.
To address this problem, they introduce a mindscape, a conceptual framework for a society that only values the human ability to use its minds.
Whoa.
Yeah, moving radically away from traditional ideas of capital, wealth, ownership. It's a complete paradigm shift, isn't it?
Absolutely. In this radical mindscape, the source says, it is not allowed to look at ownership of physical arrangements as the locus of value, but at the utilization of mind to contribute to society as the only valuable entity.
So value comes from using your mind to contribute.
That's it. The author calls this a simple change of focus to correct our current value system's distorted reflection. It's a total inversion of our current economic logic.
So instead of physical assets driving value,
It's the process of mental activity, the act of contribution. Abstract concepts like intellectual property, creativity, problem-solving, they become the bedrock, not factories or land.
and central to this is what the author calls the fundamental presupposition, that human experience can be fully described by the human ability to change the physical and mental reality. We are simply things that generate meaning, and it is awesome.
I like that it is awesome.
Me too. But it's not just a flourish, it's the bedrock of their whole proposal. It suggests the true inherent value of human existence isn't in what we accumulate, but in our mental actions, our capacity to generate meaning, innovate, solve problems, connect.
It's a declaration of our inherent worth as conscious beings.
Yeah.
And to illustrate this, the author uses a really compelling analogy, an astronomer's relatedness to a distant astronomical event.
Okay.
So even though the light pattern from a galaxy is maybe billions of light years away, and the data is heavily processed, digitized, whatever.
Right, it's very abstract data by the time it reaches us.
Exactly. But the astronomer's mind, through postulation, observation, and data analysis, still owns all related abstractions. This highlights how value isn't tied to physical proximity or tangible possession.
But to the mental engagement, the understanding.
Precisely. The interpretation, the new knowledge generated. The astronomer doesn't own the galaxy, but their mental contribution to understanding it is the source of value.
That's a crucial distinction. And this isn't just for complex science stuff, right?
Not at all. The author stresses that the same central position of mind relates to all forms of minds changing the physical world, including the act of hitting a nail in the wall.
Okay, so designing a rocket engine or mending a fence.
The fundamental source of value is the conscious, mental effort applied to change physical reality. It makes the point universal. Every deliberate, conscious effort, big or small, carries this inherent value because it originates from the mind.
It puts the carpenter and the astrophysicist on a similar plane in terms of their source of value.
Exactly. And connecting this to the bigger picture, this is the core of the Copernican revolution for economics.
Right, the title.
Yeah. The author makes this bold, almost shocking comparison, saying our current society suffers from a psychosis believing that value is a physical domain where physical things are valuable.
A psychosis, wow.
And they argue this is the same kind of folly as the geocentric description of reality that reigned till Copernicus's time.
Okay, that's comparing our entire economic system to a fundamental scientific error from centuries ago.
It is. It implies we're just as misguided about value as ancient astronomers were about the Earth being the center of the universe.
Clinging to an object-centric view despite the problems.
Just like they clung to an Earth-centric view. So, just as Copernicus shifted the view from Earth-centric to Sun-centric.
This proposal shifts value from object-centric to mind-centric.
Precisely. The author adamantly maintains value is purely a product of mind. Value does not revolve around an object, it revolves around a mind.
Value revolves around a mind.
And they clarify, even if you think the mind is just a physical state of the brain, the distinction between material objects and mental constructs is enough. It's about where the source of value originates.
Is it in the thing or in the consciousness interacting with the thing?
And the author emphatically says, the latter, consciousness, the mind.
And this radical shift from physical objects to the mind has this dramatic implication for innovation and scarcity. The author points out that if the mind is the focus of value judgments, then the diversity of new innovations seems to be unlimited.
Which is a stark contrast to a physical value system where money, by design, has to be a scarce resource to prevent inflation.
It sounds almost too good to be true, a system where scarcity just evaporates.
Well, scarcity in the traditional sense, this is critical. Our current system is limited by linking value to scarcity land, gold, even Bitcoin. It's all designed to be limited to maintain value. But if value flows from the mind, which is inherently generative, always evolving, limitless in its capacity for new ideas, then those traditional constraints of scarcity just disappear.
Because an idea can be shared infinitely without losing value.
Right. In fact, its value often increases with wider adoption. So this mind-based value is exactly what is required for the type of challenges facing the physical and mental future of humans. It suggests a sustainable, expansive path forward, not one always battling limited resources.
It's a profound recalibration of economic potential.
Totally.
Okay, so we've established the critique and the fundamental shift to a mind-based perspective. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty. How would this actually work day to day?
Right, the mechanics.
The proposal says we need to cut out this focus on the physical arrangements and replace it with an economy that only allocates value to the human act of changing matter and not the product. Then it says, i.e. allocate value to the goose and not the golden egg.
Love that analogy.
Me too. It's a profound shift, isn't it?
Yeah.
Focusing on the creator, the process, the effort, not the static outcome.
It's radical. Instead of valuing the finished product, the vase, the car, whatever, which can be accumulated, owned, traded, become a source of inequality.
You value the effort behind it.
Yes, the effort and process of creation and contribution. Take an artisan. We value the vase they make. In this system, we'd value the skilled hands, the creative thought, the persistent effort that went into shaping the clay.
So it incentivizes continuous learning, improvement, contribution.
Rather than just accumulation and resting on your laurels, so to speak.
And the author admits the word market isn't quite right for this mindscape. Which makes sense, right? Because if you strip away goods exchanging hands transactionally, what's left?
What is left?
A direct, almost primal drive.
Yeah.
See a need, fill a need. Astonishingly simple phrase for such a radical reorientation.
Yeah. The mechanism here is that filling a need only needs human will. And from this will flow any required arrangement of matter to meet that need, even if it is as simple as hitting a nail in the wall.
Wow. It really emphasizes individual agency, direct problem solving as the economic engine, bypassing all the complex financial stuff.
Your will to contribute and solve a problem is the driving force, a direct response to a recognized need. Say, a community needs better housing. Individuals would be recognized for their mental contributions, designing efficient homes, developing new techniques, organizing labor.
Rather than just getting paid to build a house to sell for profit.
Exactly. The emphasis is on the act of solving the problem.
And this leads directly to a completely new form of currency, one that's almost hard to wrap your head around. Money, as we know it paper, digital numbers would just go out of existence.
Gone, just like that.
Apparently. It would be replaced by an individual's value rating based on conscious actions, i.e. actions of the mind, as it changes the order of matter into something of value.
A value rating based on conscious actions. How would that feel day to day? What are the immediate shifts the author sees once money is gone?
Well, society, in this model, has the natural obligation to define this value and justly allocate a value rating to each human's interaction with the world.
An obligation to define value. Okay.
And the key takeaway is huge. This reality can be summarized by realizing that a person does not earn money. He sure earns recognition for mental actions of value.
Recognition is the new currency.
That's it. This recognition is the new currency and cannot be issued by banks of any sort because all human interactions generate recognition.
Wow. So no central banks. Value creation is totally decentralized, happening in every interaction.
Exactly. Imagine a world where your daily acts, kindness, problem-solving, innovation, teaching, are immediately recognized and contribute to your societal value rating.
Not arbitrary scores, but observable, verifiable impact.
Right, a continuous organic process. Value isn't dictated from the top down. It's constantly negotiated and reaffirmed by the collective, like a living metric of contribution.
That's fascinating. And what about creativity in all this? The author says any form of creativity that is perceived to improve a society's state of being is to replace capital in all its current connotations, including money.
So creativity is the new capital.
Seems like it. And this isn't just art or music, right? It must broaden the definition of valuable contribution, elevating ingenuity, problem solving.
It does. It fundamentally shifts focus from financial capital to intellectual and creative capital as the primary driver. Designing a new irrigation system, composing music that uplifts, devising a sustainable process, all become the equivalent of capital investment.
A stark contrast to accumulating capital through owning assets or financial instruments.
And the author stresses that objective judgments of true value are essential to strive for, even if maybe perfect objectivity is impossible.
How do they propose achieving that?
It's achieved when humans enter into an alliance to research the objective aspects of reality. It suggests a really scientific, collaborative approach to defining value, moving beyond subjective markets or whims to something more universally acknowledged, verifiable.
Like a massive ongoing peer review of societal contributions.
Yeah, something like that. This also dramatically redefines ownership, foundational principle. No human has the right to own someone else's mind.
Okay, that immediately dismantles intellectual servitude or exploitation.
Right. It seems fundamental to prevent the reemergence of capital-based exploitation. And while physical things can still be owned,
how does that work without money?
The author clarifies. Ownership is simply a type of abstraction associated with a physical arrangement, like the nail in the wall, designating specific social behaviors, like whose nail it is.
Ah, so ownership is a social agreement, not an inherent property.
Exactly. The value isn't in the object, the nail, but in the agreed-upon abstraction about behavior around it. So you might own your home, but its value isn't primarily the bricks and mortar.
But the collective recognition of your contribution that allowed you reside there, and the social agreements protecting that right.
That seems to be the idea. So if the object doesn't hold the value, and we don't buy things, how do we get them? The author introduces the Copernican principle of economics. Ownership and exchange happen through the mind-based value assigned to an individual or community's or company's intellectual activities. This is not a transaction in any physical sense, and can only be seen as an agreement or meeting of minds as they recognize the mutual benefit.
A meeting of minds, not a transaction. What does that look like practically? If I want a tool, how does this meeting of minds happen? Is it like my past contributions make me eligible, or?
That's a great question. It's not barter, not purchase, it sounds like.
Oh, right.
A reciprocal recognition of value.
Reciprocal recognition.
So if you, through your recognized contributions, need a tool, and someone else has the mental capacity to design or make it, the agreement or meeting of minds would be the mutual understanding that your need and their ability, plus their past contributions, creates a beneficial exchange. Your recognized value grants you access. Their act of creating adds to their recognition.
So it's a continuous flow of contribution and recognition, not discrete transactions.
Seems like it. And this also applies to encoded products of mind, like applications, songs, designs, plans, etc. Their value can only be exposed by its success.
Meaning how useful or enjoyed they are.
Exactly. Any deserving individual or group can expose the value by using or enjoying the encoded products of mind. Society's job is to protect claims on unique ideas and rate their usefulness.
So sharing and improving ideas is paramount.
Right. Exposure of new solutions, therefore, becomes the only way to earn recognition. The value is in utility and adoption, not the sale price.
Okay. And finally, to make all this work, technology plays a big role. Modern infotech can be transformed and used by the new accountants of a mind-based economic system.
New accountants, what do they do?
They're objective. Verify value perceptions of human activities as well as the relationship between human activities and physical arrangements.
Verify value perceptions using objective criteria. What kind of objectivity we're talking about? AI, peer review networks. How do you prevent gaming the system if it determines access to everything?
It suggests a really sophisticated, data-driven system, transparently tracking and validating contributions. Maybe like a global decentralized ledger using blockchain-like principles.
Oh, okay. So every recognized contribution is recorded, verifiable.
And not by some central authority assigning arbitrary scores, but a distributed network. It assesses how your mental activity changes reality for the better. If you design open source software, its value rating goes up as people use it, contribute, find it beneficial.
So the new accountants are the architects and maintainers of this transparent, auditable infrastructure, ensuring recognition is allocated fairly based on objective criteria.
Criteria that are themselves collectively defined and refined through that alliance to research objective aspects of reality. It's like a digital backbone for this whole mind-based economy.
Okay, so pulling back the lens, what does this mean for society? The author envisions a complete transformation of the state. This isn't just economics. It sounds like a radical break from geopolitics, nations, borders.
It raises a huge question. If value isn't tied to physical resources or territory, what holds societies together?
Right.
The proposal suggests the state becomes moral alliances of like-minded people, language, culture, faith, government, laws, etc., with the potential for these groups to coexist without the need for physical boundaries.
Moral alliances, not nations.
Yeah. Not abolishing governance, but reimagining its foundation. Not coercion by borders or flags, but self-selection based on shared intellectual, ethical commitments.
Like a global scientific community or an open source project.
Yeah.
Allegiance to principles, not territory.
Exactly, which fundamentally alters how disputes are resolved, how collective projects happen. Focus on shared values, not land claims.
Monumental shift.
Yeah.
So how does access to goods work then? If money's gone, the state transforms. How do I get what I need?
Access becomes a function of access to resources, but an agreement of what kind of contribution to society, local or global, warrants a specific type of access to specific goods.
So my contribution grants me access.
Right. It bypasses market access or national boundaries. Your contribution, defined by your community, recognized by the system, grants access. Contribute to renewable energy innovation. Maybe you get access to advanced energy resources. Dedicate efforts to growing food. Access to sustenance.
A direct link between doing good and receiving from the collective.
That's the idea.
One of the most compelling aspects is how it challenges scarcity and disenfranchisement. The author contends the notion of scarce resources makes little sense in the current state of advanced technologies, nuclear power in particular, because it is possible to derive all resources from electricity energy.
Implying we already have the tech capacity to provide for everyone.
Yeah. It challenges the premise that there isn't enough to go around.
Absolutely. And this leads to a powerful conclusion about universal access and dignity. The author states, modern technology can supply by default the most basic human dignity to all people purely on the notion that being human is valuable.
Just being human is valuable enough for basic dignity.
If value is inherent in mind, and our ingenuity unlocks resources via energy, then there can be no real disenfranchised individual or group. Access to capital can no longer disenfranchise anyone.
It just eradicates the concept of being left behind due to lack of money or resources. Basic needs met by default shifts everything.
Dramatically.
And crucially, this system actively considers care for vulnerable populations. Unlike capitalism as critiqued, right? The author mentions disabled people, arguing able people will benefit from contributing to their care just because the mental resources to achieve this do exist.
That's a profound shift from current welfare models, isn't it? How does recognizing the mental resources in caregiving alter priorities?
Well, it's explicitly contrasted with capitalism's weakness, where care is often a cost center, a charity case.
Right. Not seen as truly valuable work.
But in a mind-based economy, the act of caring empathy, problem-solving for needs, emotional support, organizing resources is recognized as a profound, necessary mental contribution.
It's not a burden. It's an opportunity to generate immense societal value and gain recognition.
It changes the whole incentive structure for social support, makes it integrated, celebrated. And this also means any individual can choose his or her own mind-based community and become free to govern their own life.
Finding your moral island.
Exactly. Communities that act as moral islands where value are exposed. Truly self-determined structures based on shared values, reciprocal recognition.
So in this new reality, what does contribution actually look like? What kind of mental activities count? Is it still about productive work or broader?
The author clarifies, value can have any form, from writing a song to designing a spaceship, to policing antisocial behavior, to writing code, to teaching people, to caring for old and disabled people, to doing research.
Wow, that's incredibly broad.
It all has value, just like it is the case in the current economic system, with the difference that it will not be rewarded by handouts from capital owners, but by real value.
So it radically broadens what's economically productive. Nursing, social work, often undervalued now, would be highly recognized. Purpose and meaning found in a much wider array of activities.
That list is huge. So is there any hierarchy? Is designing a spaceship more valuable than caring for someone? Or is all conscious effort inherently equal in value? And how does it handle fairness with different abilities, life stages, young, old, limited capacity?
The author addresses this. Society decides the durability of a specific type of contribution. This will solve the issue of the disparity of people's ability to contribute, and so on.
Durability of contribution, okay.
It allows for flexibility, fairness, not just immediate output, but lasting impact. Foundational research might have durable value for decades. Daily care has immediate, continuous value. It recognizes value isn't just narrow productivity, but effort, intention, needs met across the full human spectrum.
Which broadens utility, too.
Right. The utility of creativity is any possible perception of value experienced by individuals, like beauty, safety, happiness, progress, sustenance, caring, exploration, adventure, and health. The list is very, very long, including all current and post-capitalist notions of value, moving beyond material gain to all aspects of human flourishing.
It sounds so idealistic. And listeners might raise a red flag about human nature. Greed. The author says, greed will have a hard time because it will no longer be institutionally protected. How? If people are inherently greedy, how does a system without money stop it?
That's crucial. In a system where value is contribution and recognition, not accumulating capital, the incentive for greed is undermined. Greed thrives on hoarding scarce resources. If value is generated by continuous mental activity and recognition is the currency, how do you hoard recognition?
You can't really, can you? It's constantly flowing, generated, verified by the collective.
Exactly. No mechanism to accumulate vast value, not tied to ongoing, visible, beneficial mental effort. The system rewards contribution, not acquisition for its own sake. The institutional protection for greed vanishes.
Okay. And one final crucial distinction, especially for listeners familiar with economic theories. The author explicitly states, mind-based economy is not socialism in disguise.
Good clarification needed there.
Because it values only the individual's contributions. There is no shared ownership or anything associated with socialism. But people might see parallels to utopian socialist ideas or even UBI. How does the emphasis on individual contribution and no shared ownership really differentiate it? Where's the line?
It's a vital clarification. Traditional socialism often emphasizes collective state ownership of means of production, aims for equal distribution of material wealth, sometimes regardless of individual output.
Right.
This mind-based economy, however, explicitly values only the individual's mental contributions. No shared ownership of factories' land, no central authority dictating production distribution based on a plan. Communities distribute access based on the constituent mind's individual contributions.
So it's individual-focused value creation.
Described as the consequence of a progression from a consumer economy to a knowledge economy, with the required abandonment of most of the useless and unfair aspects of the current system. It's distinct, leveraging individual ingenuity that naturally benefits the collective without forced redistribution.
Okay. The author paints this truly transformative picture, a world where the solution to poverty is invaluable, and minds working on this deserves the highest recognition. Presented not as utopia, but a practical possibility, a logical next step.
Yeah, proposing that if systems aren't strapped down by traditional capital needs, those artificial constraints, the innovations for subsistence for all would naturally flow, driven by recognition for valuable mental activities.
Shifting the incentive structure toward collective well-being, continuous solutions.
Rather than being limited by financial constraints or profit motives that might ignore human dignity, it suggests poverty isn't a resource problem, but an economic design problem.
And the author grounds this not in fantasy, but in history. saying it is growing out of the undeniable successes of the Age of Enlightenment, reason, science, progress.
And relying on the current state of technological development, suggesting we now have the tools for such a complex global system.
Implying humanity has evolved to where this is practically achievable if we choose it.
Indeed, but also highlighting a critical human factor. It succeeds only when they think it is possible, and requires humans not to abandon reason.
A call to belief and rationality.
And the author acknowledges, even if it seems impossible to successfully create such a system, it has to be researched until a successful implementation is found. It's presented as logically sound and compatible with our current technologically driven behaviors.
So it's a call to persistent investigation, a challenge to overcome ingrained paradigms, not a fantasy to dismiss.
An invitation to apply the same scientific rigor we used on the cosmos to economics.
As we wrap up this really mind-bending deep dive, the author's final thought gets quite philosophical, deeply personal, adding another layer to their motivation.
They conclude that the monster of money, that metaphor for our current system, is the product of the human mind and can be put to death by the free will of human beings.
Powerful image.
And what's notable is the explicit connection to their belief in Christ's authority and finding ways for his kingdom come. This really highlights the author's personal motivation, grounding their logical arguments in a spiritual conviction about creating a more just, abundant world.
A reminder that even rigorous economic thought can come from a deeply personal place. What an incredible deep dive into a truly revolutionary concept. We've explored a proposal that fundamentally shifts value from scarce physical objects and capital
to the unlimited distributed creative output and mental contributions of individuals.
It challenges us to rethink what truly drives progress and well-being, suggesting our current models might be that disorienting mirror preventing us from solving persistent problems like poverty.
It's a profound call to acknowledge the inherent worth of every human mind and its potential.
And so, we leave you with this provocative thought. If value truly resides in the mind, and our collective mental effort is limitless, what responsibility does that put on us to design systems reflecting this truth, rather than perpetuating old paradigms of scarcity and physical ownership?
And how might we, even now, in our daily lives, start to recognize and reward mind-based contributions more than just material possessions?
A powerful question to ponder.